of Business and Community Development, to start us off today. Put your hands together for Mina Byers, please.
Thank you, Ivan, for kicking us off with safety and DE&I today. I could not be happier to kick us off today to celebrate the groundbreaking of the Nicor Gas Smart Neighborhood. Yes, we are so excited. Hopefully by now you've all learned a little bit about it. We've been trying to do quite a bit of employee education about it. Hopefully you attended our Lunch and Learn, where you saw the podium situation with Mike that was referenced earlier, but learned all about this project. In partnership with Habitat for Humanity, we're developing a net zero community that's affordable housing that really shows the role that natural gas plays in accelerating net zero for our region. And these homes are going to be energy efficient, and they're really going to include rooftop solar, battery storage, natural gas technologies, as well as electric service. And what's particularly special about this community, and Ivan sort of touched on it when he teed us up with the DE&I moment, is that these technologies that enable these homes to be net zero are going into an affordable housing community. And that means where communities don't usually have access to the benefits of net zero, now this community becomes a leader in this movement and shows how it can be done. So we're pretty excited about that. It demonstrates an equitable approach to clean energy, where communities that don't usually have those benefits can now realize them. But what does equitable really mean? We talk about it here, but do we really understand it? We have some really special guests with us here who joined us this morning for the groundbreaking event, Dr. Mark Berry and Dr. Roderick Jackson. Dr. Berry and Dr. Jackson are innovators. They hold the highest ranks in their organizations, leading research and development. And they're also champions for environmental justice and equity in our industry. We thought there was no better way to commemorate this exciting day, the groundbreaking of the Smart Neighborhood, than to learn more about equity in our industry from these two amazing leaders. So I'm going to share a little bit about them. I know they probably don't want me to sit here and read their bios, but you have to hear how fabulous they are and how lucky we are. It's such a treat to have them here with us. So Dr. Mark Berry is Senior Vice President of Southern Company Services Research and Development. In this role, he leads our industry-leading research and development organization. His organization, by the way, has been instrumental in helping us develop the Nicor Gas Smart Neighborhood, as well as the other smart neighborhoods in Southern Company, and some of his team is with us here today, so we thank them for that and for joining us. Dr. Berry also leads work around energy empowerment and environmental justice as a part of our Southern Company Moving to Equity framework. Dr. Berry has a very impressive background, including a variety of roles within Southern Company, as well as the Electric Power Research Institute. And before joining Southern, he attained the commissioned rank of Lieutenant Commander in the United States Navy. So thank you, Dr. Mark Berry, for joining us today. Let's give him a hand. And now Dr. Roderick Jackson joins us today from the National Renewable Energy Lab, where he serves as the lab program manager for buildings research, setting the strategic agenda for NREL's buildings portfolio. Prior to joining NREL, Dr. Jackson was the group manager for the Building Envelope Systems Research at Oak Ridge National Lab. He was on the forefront of the Connected Communities initiatives there and research, and he actually helped establish the Alabama Power Smart Neighborhood during his work with Oak Ridge National Lab, so a longtime partner to Southern Company. And that project was the first project in the Southeast to connect high-performance homes with a community microgrid. It was an honor and an inspiration to work with Dr. Jackson and his team on the research for the Nicor Gas Smart Neighborhood, and also joining us from NREL is Shin Jin from his team. So we're so happy to have you in Illinois with us today. And Dr. Jackson has a long list of awards he's received, including 2022 Black Engineer of the Year Award, and I believe he has some roots with ABE, which I hope we'll touch on today. And facilitating this great dialogue for us today is our own President and CEO, Wendell Dallas, an equity champion in his own right. Some of you may not know that Wendell, over his 30-year career, has been an advocate for equity. He has served on numerous economic development and workforce boards. He's been recognized by the Georgia Diversity Council for his commitment to advancing his peers in his organization, and he was a governor's appointee and board chairman of the State of Georgia's Workforce Development Board. So please join me in welcoming this amazing panel.
Thank you, Mina. So guys, are you on? Okay, yeah, good.
Yes.
I love that non-response, just tapping the mic, that's great. Folks, really today is a very, very special day. I just want to commend the entire team for what took place this morning. The groundbreaking for the Smart Neighborhood was really incredible, and that's a culmination of all the work and commitment to our customers here in Illinois, and that we truly are part of the solution. And I could not be more proud to be a member of this company. Today, Mina read the bio of these fine gentlemen here. One I might pick on a little bit more than others, this guy that wears a funny-looking bow tie over there. But I really appreciate their work, and they really are, as you will hear today, through a few questions I have for them, and we'll open it up later on for you to ask a couple of questions. But this topic is so important. It really is a reflection of who Southern Company is, Southern Company Gas, Nicor Gas, and NREL. And so we appreciate you being here today. So I'm gonna jump right in with the first question. Nicor Gas and Southern Company have a strong DE&I culture, and everyone has really a good understanding of what diversity is. We spent a lot of time talking about inclusion, but it's maybe a harder time defining the E. So how do you describe equity, both as an organization and as an energy industry? Mark, we can start with you.
Yeah, so when I think about equity, the easiest way, I try to make things simple for myself, and the way I think about it is there a systematic barrier that prevents you from living your life to the fullest? And this systematic barrier may be of no fault of your own, but it exists and prevents you from living your full life. When I think about energy and I think about equity, when you combine those two things together, how many of us have ever been without your power, right? Or you didn't, your gas wasn't on. And when you were living your life during that short period of time, because our operations are so reliable, you can remember that, right? You're just like, man, I can't wait till I get my gas back. I can't wait till I get my electricity back. Because your life is so much better because you have access to energy. When you think about worldwide, there's a big effort worldwide to give people access to energy. But there are systematic barriers. And when I think about energy equity and systematic barriers in our space, one would be access. Do you have access to energy? I know here recently, Nicor Gas just brought gas. It's going to bring gas to the Pembroke community, where their lives are going to be much better because they have access to natural gas. Mina just mentioned about the neighborhood the event we were at this morning about providing that community access to technology to live a better life. So one component is access. The other is affordability. So there's a couple of ways that you can address that. I know Nicor just gave $5 million to the Salvation Army to help give assistance for low, moderate income customers to be able to pay their bill. The other way would be, how can we reduce their bill? And you can do that by providing infrastructure. And that's what we're doing in this Green Freedom neighborhood, is we're providing infrastructure to low, moderate income customers so that they can live a better life. So for me, in terms of equity, I think about how can we address systematic barriers that prevent people from living their fullest life.
Excellent, thank you. Dr. Jackson.
So thank you, and once again, just thanks for inviting me to participate and allowing us to partner in this project. I think it's an excellent project. And I want to just kind of go back to the picture. I think the tree and the two individuals trying to reach the fruit on the tree. I think it really really articulates or provides a good example of how we can think about equity in this context and how I think about it in the way we approach it. At NREL, you had the person on the left, the tree to systematic barriers. The systematic barriers in that case was the tree that was leaning over. That was a systematic barrier that was there, and if we didn't have representation from both communities, from the person on the left and the right, we would just see the tree, and if we only did research or we only participated with on the left side, we would think, wow, we got a ladder, and that ladder allows the people on the left to reach the fruit. They're good, but unless you have representation of both sides of the tree, you say, whoa, the ladder we designed for the left doesn't work on the right, so that's not equitable. So representation of both sides of the tree is important. So that's the first thing to me, is that how do we make sure that we have people participating so that we understand the barriers? And then to the latter part is the benefits, because we have to make sure that just the person on the left side of the tree isn't the only person that gets the fruit. I think if we only don't have representation in the beginning and we're only looking at one side, we have systematic barriers benefits the person on the left, and then the people on the right, which are typically the lower income, the low to moderate incomes, we don't even know that it doesn't work for them. Or we say, well, they got one apple, and so that was good enough. But now I think equity means that we have to ensure that we develop solutions, be it a ladder, be it something that addresses those systematic barriers that allows both sides to be able to benefit. And I love the way that Mina articulated that historically we lack access, and now we're going from this neighborhood is going from lacking access to actually being a leader. So now, by developing what the leadership in innovation in this community looks like, we'll be able to replicate this across the country. So now that equitable solutions, so that both sides of the tree, no matter if the systematic barriers exist, and how do we bring those down, but now we can actually allow both to participate in the actual be represented and the benefits of the system.
Oh, very good. Yes, go
Can I
ahead.
ask you a question? So earlier,
Not too hard.
no. So earlier when we were talking, you were talking about intentionality. So can you speak to intentionality? So you talked about the ladders. How do we bring intentionality forward?
I love that question. One of the things Shin will say at NREL, I have two words that I try to push all the time is strategic and intentional. You know, we have to be strategic and intentional. And in this case, with the neighborhood, we're intentional about understanding the challenges that we may face in a Habitat for Humanity that we may not face in a Hoover, Alabama, or we may not face in Atlanta, Georgia, where we had two different types of smart neighborhoods. And if we're not intentional, we would say, well, okay, we understand what happens in Hoover in a upper income to upper moderate to higher income community, or in Atlanta, and we may miss very substantive challenges that exist in the habitat type environments. So I think this intentionality of understanding the problem we're solving, I like to say, make sure you're solving the right problem, and being intentional about that, I think in this case allows us to do that.
Excellent. So Mark, for everybody here, so Mark has worked in Birmingham and Atlanta for Southern Company and Georgia Power. So I'm asking him questions about Southern Company in general because he's got that background in the various opcos of our business. So you both mentioned or talked a little bit about sort of an awareness, right? You have to understand what's going on around you in order to be able to see this clearly. So I think we can agree that equity starts by looking at ourselves. And both at Southern Company and with NREL, there's some really great work going on. And so can you tell us about what does it look like within your company? So Mark, maybe you can talk about what the work that we're doing within Southern Company, and then Roger, you can do the same with NREL as well.
Yeah, I'll start by saying, so I've had two really proud moments where I just couldn't believe the company. One was when Tom Fanning, when he first became CEO, he offered same-sex benefits. Like, that just kind of blew my mind at the time in our country. The second was right after the death of George Floyd, Ahmaud Arbery, and Breonna Taylor, and the company created the Move to Equity framework. So for me, if you're unfamiliar with it, you can go to boldlyforward.com and read the report. But that really focuses our efforts on what we're trying to do in the equity space. So there are 5 components. One is talent. So making sure that we remove systematic barriers where we give everyone the opportunity to contribute, ensuring that our workforce is representative of the communities that we serve. The second point is work environment. I think our ERGs are really helping us with that. We just spent a moment talking about DEI. We're having this moment talking about equity. So how do we think and create a welcoming environment? The third piece is supplier inclusion. And when Atlanta Gas Light joined Southern Company, one thing that I felt that Nicor Gas was the best at was supplier inclusion. And a lot of those best practices are really flowing into Southern Company and making it better. So under that pillar, we have a stretch goal of 30% of all we spend being with diverse suppliers. So that's the third. The next is civic engagement. So we're all involved in boards and organizations within our community. How can we use our platform and push equity within our community? And the last, and my favorite, is community investment in social justice. And that's where the company made a $225 commitment to making our community better through investments. One of those pillars is energy empowerment. And the project, the Green Freedom Project, fits that to a T. How can we use investment, our influence in the community, to bring equity to our customers and our community?
Great. I love those examples, and just kind of the way we're approaching it with Enterprise. I remember the story as it goes. I don't know how true it is, but the story as it goes that President Kennedy, when they were getting ready, NASA was getting ready to send a man on the moon, and he came across someone who was sweeping. He said, "What are you doing? What are you working on?" And and expecting the answer to be sweeping, but the answer was, "I'm putting a man on the moon." So every person, from the person who was sweeping, the person who was the engineer, the people who was going to the moon, they understood their individual contribution to going to the moon. And we're trying to do a similar approach there at NREL, particularly in the buildings program, because I guess I have a bully microphone per se, that every chance. So one, it's awareness. So one, making sure that we have clarity that our goal is to advance equity. I like to boil it down to a North Star. To say, okay, all the things we're working on, what's the North Star for us? That it's equitable decarbonization. We have to make sure that it's equitable as we push towards and we transition to a decarbonized energy system. And so in that approach, how can we make sure that we're thinking about it, not just as we have to deploy technologies everywhere, because if you deploy technologies everywhere or to everyone, but they were only developed for some, it may not work appropriate in those situations. So we're now saying, for us, how do we make sure at the research level? So if you're an early stage researcher, let's say you're working on a new energy storage material that can help, let's say like the new neighborhood, the smart neighborhood, without battery storage. But next day, the next generation of energy storage materials, how do we make sure that it will work in all communities? Because maybe we go to an existing infrastructure, an existing building type, the type of interactions that battery will have to go in with the actual how the electricity, the demand profile of individual profiles, how it varies between communities. If we only understand how batteries work with upper income families who have a 9 to 5, a very traditional type of occupancy patterns, we may develop batteries that don't apply for families with a very non-traditional type of working structure. And so for us, as a researcher, when you're developing your design of experiments, we're now asking the questions, how did you consider how this applies to every community, to every behavior type, to not only looking at behavior, but what about if you have a building or a community with the infrastructure the infrastructure isn't the same for all communities, to say the building infrastructure or the actual grid infrastructure. And so asking those questions up front so that we ensure that every technology applies everywhere. And so those are two examples that we're using to say, now let's make sure that equity means that we're developing solutions for all. And then lastly, one more, I said two, but one more is that we have as you can see, I'm passionate about this. I have to tone myself down and not talk too much, but we have some initiatives that are focused on communities and working with communities. And one of those is Communities to Clean Energy. It's a DOE-supported initiative where we're working specifically with communities to say, what are some of your barriers or what are the opportunities and how can, as an organization, we can understand your unique conditions and your unique circumstances and fit a plan that fits your goal. We won't cut and paste from this community and apply it to yours, but we're actually developing solutions and plans that resonate with the individual needs of that community.
Yeah, I just want to add, I think a lot of times, so I'm an engineer and I like the tech, right? But when I was sitting in the audience today and I was thinking about and envisioning this community of 17 homes and green freedom, I think the name is important. The second part, the freedom part. So what are we really giving this community through our investment? And you have to think about it. Like we have all these technologies. So this week we had a storm go through Georgia and the lights were out and my wife had me out there with the generator and I was spilling gas on myself and she was mad at me because I didn't smell good. She said, you
Natural
need to go
gas
take a
generator,
bath.
man.
Right.
Natural gas generator.
Right. I got you. But what we're really giving with this investment is quality of life, right? That's what you're really giving. Someone, if there's an outage, they can still live a high quality of life. And it's not just that family. That home is going to be in that community for the next 100+ years. So if you think about the home that you live in, you're probably not the first. And if you are the first, you won't be the last. You're going to leave it to your kids or your family. And those homes are going to be there for generations. And once that capital is paid off, you're giving someone access to clean energy for generations. That's what we're doing. So when we talk about green freedom, right, we're giving quality of life. So look, I love the tech, and I can talk about the tech all day with PVs and batteries, just like Dr. Jackson here. But I just want to say that what we're really giving people is freedom and quality of life.
Very good, very good. Yes,
Can
go
I
ahead,
add
man.
on?
Keep adding, man, keep adding.
I'll get kicked out, escorted out of the door pretty soon. But there's this movie, in the end of it, they talk about, so when did you fall in love with hip hop? And so I like to use that kind of analogy and say, so when did I fall in love with clean energy? And for me, it was initially, I know it's like terrible, but and I used to give that a story, and it was one day when I was hiking, I was on one of the Colorado has these 14,000 peaks that are 14,000 feet above sea level, and I was on top of the mountains looking out at the environment and saying, how could we not do whatever we could to save this environment? This is so pristine, it's so amazing that we've been blessed to occupy, and that was my driving force. When I fell in love with clean energy. But then, maybe 3 years ago, I was like, but I'm not doing this for the planet. I'm doing this for the people. And if we're saving, if we don't really connect the dots and say, no, really, this has to be equitable, it has to apply to everyone, we can sometimes say, okay, I'm just saving the planet. No, but equity to me means that we now shifted to where we're now saying, how do we save the planet? How do we save the planet for the people? It starts to require equity to be there because you can't get from A to B without making sure it works for everyone. And so now I use analogy and change it and say, so when did I fall in love with equitable clean energy? And it's really when I understood that it has to apply for everyone for us to get to it.
So can I jump right in?
One more, man, go ahead.
Yeah, so I just want to uplift this gentleman sitting next to me because when I was looking at the program and we were looking at all the technology providers, what we are really doing here is showing that it works, right? You're proving the concept. And the thing that you have done in terms of your technical gift and your gift to the world is you are proving that it works and somebody's going to see it and the prices, like the resale price and the demand for those houses is going to be high. And the next developer is going to see it and says, I want to replicate what was done here. And so it's not just the 17 that we're building. I think you are building a movement in terms of how you care about the people and what you're trying to do. So I just want to celebrate you.
Oh, this is, I think the people in this room, I'm here on the panel. Thank you.
So today we celebrated the Smart Neighborhood groundbreaking, and this is an important example of equity and sustainability. And so, we're focusing, we're looking at, NICOR's looking at optimizing net zero, right? Because we know that in order for us to reach that, we also want to make sure we transition in a way that it's affordable and resilient. So what are you seeing as opportunities in our industry to move toward equity, especially in this space?
So opportunities I see, like I said, since Nina first approached us about working together, I've been super passionate and super excited because I see this is one of the biggest examples of opportunities for equity. And so reasons why we've already said so, but just to kind of restate, is it's saying that we don't have to take a posture of the best technologies go towards the highest incomes. We apply trickle-down clean energy or trickle-down innovation such that eventually, and sometime in the future, the best, when it's actually not the best anymore, it's 30 years old, we apply it into the communities. We're breaking that trend and say, no, we're actually starting with this community, understanding, building innovation, and we're not just building kind of the best in technology. We're building the best Habitat for Humanity home or Habitat for Humanity neighborhood. This will be one of the best neighborhoods in the country. And so for me, equity is saying just because of systematic barriers or whatever that have created the environment, the situation that you're currently in exists, we can still say, no, we can develop and we can innovate in ways that you can advance and have, like to your point, intergenerational, not just intergenerational wealth, but intergenerational energy, but intergenerational innovation. Because now we're normalizing innovation in these communities in ways that we may not have done. So to me, that's where equity, the opportunities for equity exist.
Yeah, so when I started at Southern, it was a very different company. So I started as an intern, and I'll never forget the first presentation I gave was at a coal plant down in Mississippi. And we were talking about reducing emissions, so that's what I did early in my career, was reduce emissions from coal facilities. And it was a time in our company where you could not even mention the word climate. People didn't talk about it. But I have seen a journey in our company, and now we have a net zero goal. And that net zero goal, for us to achieve that, is going to take all different types of options. And I believe kind of the green freedom community is just one of those options. And I'm looking for that technology to keep advancing and people build those type neighborhoods in the future. So I'm just so optimistic. So for me, it seems like we are energized as a company. We're thinking about not just green energy, but equity at the same time. So if you look back and you see a home that was built in 1920, people weren't even thinking about equity. So now we're thinking about how do we intentionally move toward 2050, toward net zero, and we're doing it intentional, and we're not leaving people behind. We're trying to bring the whole entire community along with us at the same time. And to me, that is just really exciting.
Excellent, excellent. So let me let's dig a little bit deeper here now. Coming out of COVID, the world changed, and we're in this new place now. But we also we experienced the murder of George Floyd, and when that occurred, we as a company, even everywhere, we heard about equity every day. And it was the news, corporations, neighbors, we all were talking about it. But it feels like things have gone somewhat silent since then. But clearly, as you've both stated, we're still moving this direction. We're still having these conversations, being more intentional about it. So the question is, how do we keep the conversation going? How do we maintain that momentum? And then what can everyone here listening today, what can they do to help keep us moving in the right direction as well?
Well, I'll jump in and say a couple of things. Is for us, one of the things we're doing, you're right, I think when that first year, that 2020, we talked a lot about equity. And we don't talk about it as much, but I was super excited to see you have a safety moment, and you have a DEI moment. And that's like bake it into the culture. So I think the question is to how do we keep it going is to baking it into the actual framework of how business is done. And some of the things that we're trying to do, I would say, even at Inrail, to say, okay, we had our initial kind of learning process. What is equity? And one of the things we did was say, well, let's bake this into our culture so every part of the organization can be able to understand, appreciate what that means. And what that means is that you have to be able to say and be willing to say, what does equity mean for me and what I'm doing? Because a lot of times we say, well, I know what equity means for what you're doing, but it doesn't necessarily apply to me. It's uncomfortable to kind of have that kind of self-reflection as we talked about earlier. But I think that's some of the things we're saying. So we give the example of like, so some of the things that we're doing to bake it in, for example, we model homes and we model communities and we model infrastructure. And so the question is, well, what are the embedded assumptions that we have? And so for us to say, okay, now we're saying for every data set that we use, is it equitable? Did it come from everywhere? For every model that we use, are the assumptions applicable everywhere? So for us, it's really trying to bake in and keep that conversation going and even expanding this conversation, say that if you're not thinking equitable, are you being credible? And now linking it and connecting it to other things, because if you're a technologist or engineer or you're a finance planner or whatever you're doing and you apply a business model or a technology model or engineering solution to the wrong problem, you're not just not being equitable, you're losing credibility. So those are some of the things that we're starting to do. One, ensuring that we continue to talk about it, and we're not at the DEI moment now. It's one of the things that we may steal and make sure that we kind of bring it to but we have been saying, how do we make sure we bring it to the level of safety, where safety is baked into everything we do. We understand you don't do a project without having a safety plan. How do we kind of start doing this? So those are some of the things that we're trying to do to kind of bake it in, keep it going.
Yeah, I would say I remember having a conversation with Chris Womack when he was president of External Affairs at Southern Company. And when all this came about, he said, look, I really don't want this work to be episodic. And he would say that at almost every meeting after that I heard him speak on this topic. And so now as the CEO, I think we all understand this is something that's very important to him. We talked about safety and how that starts at the top. I think at the top of our company and our management council, they feel very strongly in what we're doing as a company. But I would want to challenge everyone in the room while we are living that when we are here at work, just like safety at home, that we have to take diversity, equity, and inclusion into our personal lives. So I agree with you that it's about culture. And so we're establishing that culture here. But if we want to keep this movement alive, we have to take it outside of these walls and take it into the communities that we live in and we serve. And we'll hear people say things that go against our beliefs, and we shouldn't get mad or anything. We should approach them in love and say, well, let me give you a different perspective to think about on this particular topic. It shouldn't be judgment. It should definitely just be working with someone, trying to educate them and share the culture that we have here at Southern Company, here at Nicor Gas, with our broader community. And that's exactly what we're doing with this neighborhood in Green Freedom. We're sharing our ethic and our ethos with that community.
And just to build on culture, and one of the things we talked about earlier is, I think it was a headline once that, culture eats strategy for lunch. and it's, culture is hard to change, but if you're committed to really doing something that says, I'm committed to baking this into the culture. And so that's where I think the patience for equity to say, okay, well, this is a long game. This is structural. This is really put throughout the whole organization, and having that intentionality throughout the whole organization to do that, and then having examples like the Smart Neighborhood we have to be able to point to that this is something that the organization supports to the level of actually having, when you drive by this, when you see the buildings being built, when you see the volunteers happening, this is part of our culture. It helps to reaffirm that. So I also agree. I think it's that culture and having the patience to really bake it in.
Excellent. All right. I think, do we have mics, I think, around the room? How about that timing? So we're going to open it up here to see if anyone has questions. I've got more, but I want to give folks a chance here to ask questions. So hands up, anyone?
Roderick, you mentioned a couple of things. You mentioned that one of like your North Star is equitable decarbonization, and that you're constantly preaching to your team intentionality and strategy. How do you guys at NREL envision and are working towards that in the existing communities? So knowing that there's already a lot of communities and housing that's not equitable and the energy bills are high, what's some work that NREL is doing or focus that you guys are doing specifically to reach those communities?
That is a great question. So I'll start with, I use the analogy. On a good year, you have about a million or so new buildings built. And on average, you have over 100 and some odd million in the country. You have about 100 and some odd million buildings existing. And so if we're not addressing the existing building stock, we're just kind of we're only addressing 1% of the problem. So with that kind of premise, yes, we are trying to do more existing buildings. There was a partnership announced with the Department of Energy last month maybe on Building America, whereas historically the Building America program itself has been around for maybe the last 30 years or so. And a lot of the focus of Building America has been new construction. But with this new kind of phase of Building America is starting to shift to how do we focus on existing buildings and taking some of that existing stock. And the challenge is because not all the solutions that we may use for new construction don't really apply. So that's an example of that focus and that shifted focus. But it's a harder problem. It's a much harder problem because you're dealing with the buildings that are already there. But that's a really big and more recent example of how we're shifting our focus with partnerships with industry and utilities to be able to tackle that.
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate all the conversation. One thing that I'm kind of hearing repeatedly is I know someone had mentioned that if we're not demonstrating that equity, that we're not credible. And someone else had mentioned taking that outside of the organization. Well, for our team in the contact center, we have 3,500 to 7,000 opportunities a day talking with the customers to do that, to make that impact. How do we do that? Over the phone, when those agents are talking to our customers.
I'm gonna tell you, I went down to the Georgia Power Customer Care Center before and listened to the calls, and I just want to give a shout out to anybody that works phones. It is freaking amazing. Because you have to be able to answer almost any question, and they want to know right then. But I think that's a great opportunity to just ask them about their experience, right? And just say, hey, we care. Like, hey, well, tell me about your home. When was it built? What's the method of construction? Just kind of trying to get a feel for how people are living and how we might be able to contribute. So I know that you have probably a quota. You got to do a number of calls by a certain hour, but I think we got a CEO up here who might be willing to give you more time to have that engagement and talk to the customer and tell them a little about what we're doing. And I know nobody's ever on hold, but if they are on hold for more than 5 seconds, then you might have a recording just kind of talking about green freedom and what the company is trying to do. I'm just throwing some ideas.
Yeah, no, I like that. That's good. That's good.
I have a different perspective. So one of the things that I am so excited about this partnership we have with Southern Company, with Nicor Gas, is it allows us, we're a national laboratory, so your tax dollars at work. And so one of the ways that we are most impactful is that we're connected to what's really happening. So for us is how do the challenges that you're hearing at the call, your front line, are we working on those? Or are we developing solutions that will be out in 5 years or 2 years or 5 years or 10 years that will meet the needs of people today? And historically we haven't. We don't have a call center. We don't have the customer. We're not a utility. So if there was a way that we start to even kind of bring those challenges, or maybe there's some systemic challenges that we can advance new technologies. We can develop new technologies so that we can not only we can develop technologies that make those solutions and the cost activity or responses even easier. So that's one way that I think, because we may only have the perspective of a small few, and going back to what equity means is representing all. How do we bring those to the table, even as a research kind of perspective?
Excellent. And I would add to that. I mean, these are, first of all, these are great ideas. And part of I think it should stress the importance of us understanding what we're doing as a company. Because you can't script conversations when it comes to showing empathy and other things and understanding what a customer is going through and experiencing. You just have to know it. And so, yes, there's a lot of responsibility on those that are answering the calls each and every day. But the more you know about what we're doing and why we're doing it, it puts you in a much better position to help the customer. And I think about what we're doing with our C3. There's things, we're making small adjustments, and those thoughts and ideas are coming from folks that are working frontline. So it should help us to appreciate that your voice matters. So when you see something and think we can work on something, tell us, because it's a team effort. It's not just one individual. It may be years of experience and knowledge hearing the same thing over and over, and then we're able to see an opportunity where we can make an adjustment, because that's what it means to be taking care of our customers. And while we're looking at maybe on the residential side, the same dynamic applies for commercial and industrial customers. We're trying to spend more time with them listening to what they need, listening to what they're struggling with. That's when we do that as a company, the better we're able to take that information and do something with it. It just builds a much stronger organization. At the end of the day, happier customers. And we're focusing on all customers. So today's is a perfect example of making sure we're balanced. And it's nice when you're able to put your best work into a group that needs it the most. So that's showing that we can do it. All right, now how much time do I have left? Just a couple of minutes? 4 minutes, to be exact. Great. Well, what I'd like to do is just allow Mark and Roderick just to kind of maybe give sort of a closing thought. I mean, we've really enjoyed your comments here today. So what is something that you want us to leave here with today?
So I'll just say that this day has been very exciting to me, to see research go and become something real in reality and helping people. So I'm excited about the project, but I'm even more excited to see all of you here in this room, and that you made the choice to come hear a presentation about equity and what Nicor Gas is doing to invest in the community. So I am just so encouraged that you are here and that you found that this topic was important enough for you to come and sit down and listen to us. So I just want to thank you for your interest and just thank you for what you do on a daily basis.
And I just want to kind of follow up on, on that. I want to thank you. Today was, we all could love our jobs, but there are some challenges that we have sometimes. And sometimes you need to see examples or things to provide encouragement. Today was one of those days for me. I was sitting there and I was looking and just the passion of the individual conversations the speeches or the remarks that were being made by you and me and everyone there and the pastor and the Habitat for Humanity and the mayor and the representatives. And it's just taking it from an abstract concept of energy or abstract concept of a design or building technologies or community scale or neighborhoods to actually seeing the people who have been approved for Habitat Home and hearing their excitement saying, I didn't think I would get approved, but I got approved in February and I'm really excited. And so to me, thank you for allowing us a partner. Thank you for, as Mark said, to be here today, to hear and talk about equity. But thank you for actually having a tangible example of what that looks like and means. And we'll be able to drive by. I'm in Colorado, and it'll be a far drive, but it'll be a drive, it'll be an opportunity to see that this is what it means, that we're not just saying that the best, the most innovation happens in the highest income communities that always get it. We're actually saying, no, we can do different, we can do better. And to me, that's, I don't know if you can tell I'm excited. This is super exciting to me, so thank you.
Well, one thing I do want to add now, Mina mentioned something about Abe earlier. Do you want to share what your Abe connection is earlier? Because I mean, I want to have it in my closing remarks in terms of why I'm asking this question.
Oh, that's good. I don't understand how I forgot that, but it's funny when life is interesting. So when I was a senior in high school, I was applying. I wanted to go to Georgia Tech. I'm surprised I don't have a Georgia Tech something on Georgia Tech right now.
I'm wearing your yellow for
I
gold,
appreciate
right?
that. Go Yellow Jackets. But and I got my first scholarship to Georgia Tech was a scholarship from Abe. ABE is the American Association for Blacks in Energy. And so just to be able to, and I didn't know I was a senior in high school. I had no clue. It was funny. At that time, my dad built houses, his brothers built houses, and I grew up at the age of 3 on a job site. It gets really hot in Mississippi. I thought I would never have anything to do with buildings and houses because I was running away to engineering. And I thought, okay, I'm going to school to be an engineer. And to now be here some years later, I don't remember how many, but some years later, and still engaged. So being a black in engineering, when the story was foretold as a senior in high school, and being now a part of a community, I can't say enough of, life has a way of whatever pathway we have, and it kind of brings us back to that. So it's cool kind of to be back here.
Well, we're glad that you followed through on that. We're glad that you were a recipient of that. And what I hope this helps you to see, I could ask these gentlemen a lot of details and numbers and strategy. I mean, these are brilliant minds sitting up here helping us make sure that we're serving our customers extremely well. But I also want to ask each and every one of us to make sure that challenging ourselves, what are we doing in this space? Now, we mentioned Smart Neighborhood, Habitat for Humanity, which means there's going to be opportunities for us to what? Volunteer. Not that I'll be looking for you or looking at names, but I did challenge the mayor of Aurora today, and he committed. So we're going to be out there one of those days working. So I would encourage you to be a part of the process. Your voice, your perspective matters. We are going to be able to do bigger and better things as a result of the knowledge, experience, and wisdom and insight you bring to what we do each and every day. You talked about culture. You talked about awareness. You talked about all the wonderful good things we're doing. It's because we care about the people we're serving. So today, as we focused on understanding equity in our industry, it's so important because we are part of the solution. So I want to thank Dr. Berry and Dr. Jackson for their time today. Let's please give them a round of applause.